Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show, and thank you for checking out today's episode. I'm excited for today's guests, and of course, check out our archives if you haven't already, because we've got great interviews with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies. We've got Netflix in the archives. We got Grubhub recently. We had Redfin recently, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activision Blizzard. Go check them out. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And I've been doing podcasts for 13 plus years now, huge advocate of them. And so check out Rise 25. I've got all kinds of resources on their website about how you can do it for yourself as well. All right, my guest here today is Juan Carlos Bosacoma. He is the president at CIO Landing, which is a IT managed solutions company based out of Chicago. He's also author of the book, Sitting Duck, Why Your Business is a Cyber Criminal's Ideal Target. Love that title. He also has two master's degrees, not one, but two master's degrees and a background in entrepreneurship. And we're going to hear some stories from him about his journey. And Juan Carlos, great to have you here today. And we were chatting beforehand about my lemonade stand question, which I love asking people about their entrepreneurial exploits as a kid. And you actually, back in the day, were carving little toys out of wood and then sold them when you're 12 or 13 years old. Tell us about that.
Yes. I was about 13. I was making my own toys, and at the time, we'd, of course, like little kids make little guns and stuff and knives to play around. And kids of the neighborhood would ask me and said, "Oh, we'd like one of those." And I said, "Well, I'll make it. You can pay me 50 cents. And pretty soon I had a lineup of kids asking for that. And that's how I had my ice cream money.
Now, did you grow up around entrepreneurship? Did your parents own a business or anything like that? Or? Yes,
my dad was an entrepreneur. He was a geologist and metallurgist. I grew up in Bolivia, and he had mining companies there. So I was exposed to that type of life early on.
Got it. So it wasn't unnatural for you to think, oh, there's an interest, I'm going to sell this for 50 cents to these kids.
That's right. And I had to do it if I wanted money too. So.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I hear these stories and it's driven from kids who didn't have a lot of money, or other times it's just, they're not quite sure what it was in them that led them to turn around and offer to sell it to a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that, my dad didn't have a job, right? He was the one making the jobs. And then because it was mining industry, prices fluctuation made it that it was feast or famine at home. So sometimes things were great. Other times it's like, oh my gosh, where's the next dollar going to come from? And so you're exposed to that early on, and you're like, well, I better start thinking, how I'm going to get ice cream money.
If you reflect back on that, because I had a kind of a similar experience growing up. My father got laid off 3 separate times when I was growing up, and we went from doing fine, comfortable, nice school district, that sort of thing, to all of a sudden needing to slash expenses, be very careful with our costs and stuff like that. If you reflect back on that experience now, how do you think that changed your relationship with money and with, creating a company for yourself?
Well, I think it does influence how you think about resources and how you're going to take what you have and really stretch it. And I think that really helps when you're an entrepreneur, because early on your constraint is money, and you're saying, well, I have limited amount and I need to deliver service. So how am I going to put that on a stretcher so I can do all these things? So you start getting very creative because you had to get creative early on. So
yeah. And a couple other ways you got creative was you started fixing bicycles and getting paid for that, and learned to fix blenders, replacing motors.
Right. And I mean, at home, we had a blender and it broke down, and it's like, well, let me go check it out, see what I can do. I was handy, and it's like, oh, I need to buy a couple of parts, and then go to the store, and lo and behold, when I'm buying the part from the store, the people that own the store are like, you know how to fix these things? I said, yes. And I said, come to the back room, and then go to their back room, and there's like hundreds of the machines that are piled up, and he goes, we don't know how to fix them. Would you be interested in fixing? I said, I'll charge you X dollars per machine. And next thing I knew was I had more work than I could handle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, did you turn around and hire friends to come do it, or what did you do?
Well, you know what? That would have been the natural thing, but some people they were not interested, in doing the work. So it was like, nobody wants to do the work. But so there I was.
You did it yourself.
Yeah, I had to do it myself. So later on, I started a business where people were a little bit more interested in than fixing blenders, which was DJ. So I started a small thing where I would do parties for high schools, and I had my speakers and records, and I would do parties there. People wanted to help me because that's
a little bit more fun. That's a little more sexy than fixing blenders in some back room.
Yeah, you bet. So there it was easy to say, hey, you want to help me? And I said, of course. I want to go where the girls are.
Go to the party, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So did that.
Not as much of a labor problem.
No. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because one of them you do make money, but it's not sexy. And this one, they could have made more money on the other one, but you make money, but it's a lot more fun.
Well, so having worked in Hollywood and having worked in Washington, D.C., which is, they say, is kind of like Hollywood, but for nerds, right? I've learned that the unsexy businesses oftentimes are the ones that make a lot of money, right? So it's the ones that are sexy and fun and exciting you don't get paid that much in. Now, for you, I want to dive back into your history because you've started a number of different entrepreneurial ventures. You actually worked at the Quaker Oats company and actually got them to fund your MBA, which is great. But shortly after that, after you got your MBA, you started an internet service provider in the mid 90s. This is back before Time Warner, back before Xfinity, Comcast, and anything like that. It was back when they were smaller internet service providers. But tell me about that, starting an internet service provider in the mid 90s.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was working at the Quaker Oats company, and at the time, my brother lived also in Chicago, and we always talked about creating a company, both of us. And the company had this like a voluntary layoffs, so you could volunteer and you get a package. And
this is your brother's company or Quaker Oats?
Well, the Quaker Oats company where I worked.
Did that satisfy your requirement to pay off your MBA?
Surprisingly, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I volunteered, and they were like, "Yeah, we need people," and it's like, okay. They had a nice package, which I don't remember at the time. It was 6 months or a year, and it's like, oh, this is terrific.
Was it because you had an idea of another business you wanted to start, or because oftentimes people don't want to volunteer for that kind of thing unless they're like on the verge of retirement or something?
Well, there were a couple of things going on. Number one, didn't have a boss I liked. Made my life difficult. Mm-hmm. And then I remember at the time seeing the first browser, Netscape, that came up.
Yep.
And I'm looking at that, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating, And then it was like, well, how do you get access to this thing called the internet? And I was working at the time with modems. And it's like, oh, right. It's kind of like dial-up, and then you connect to the network. And it's the type of thing I was doing at the Quaker Oats company. And it's like, and started digging into it. And of course, there were all these companies popping up all over the country. And I'm talking to my brother, and it's like, this looks like a really cool opportunity. And he was also in the middle of a job transition. And I said, well, let's give it a go. Let's see if we can work this out. And so started digging a little bit more, kind of created a simple plan. And next thing I know, I'm buying a Cisco router. And I didn't know how to program a Cisco router, but I was technical, so it turned out to be, it was not such a big thing. And buying modems and demand started happening, and we started selling dial-up for people. And after
now,
dial-up,
I think around this time, a lot of people are using what, AOL, Prodigy, CompuServe are the big companies, the bigger
that is
companies.
correct.
Okay, so those your competitors at this time?
Yeah. It was particularly AOL. Prodigy was a little bit kind of on the decline. So it was AOL that was flooding the market with their diskettes, and people would be getting that. And what they found is people wanted to get maybe something a little bit more than what they could offer. And price-wise, it was the same price point, but it was not a closed platform, but open. Mm-hmm. So we started getting people and businesses. And within the first year, we grew to a couple of thousand dial-up that were home users. And we decided, they're really a pain in the neck to deal with them, because you get flooded with questions.
Support questions, yeah.
Yeah, but we had businesses. And the businesses, clearly was a better option. And so we got to know some other companies around, and we sold the dial-up business, the home dial-up business, and we stayed with the business to business.
And what was it like starting a business with your brother?
It turned out really well. Because he was more focused on the financial side, and he actually was doing a little bit of the selling as well. My focus at the time was just technical. So I was a resident geek that did all the geek stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas he did all the other parts of the company. I mean, I would help as well, but my job was doing the technical work.
Yeah. And so this company, it looks like you kind of had an evolution of a couple of different companies. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we started growing, and we called that company US Host. And the reason for that name was we were selling dial-up, but of course people wanted to have websites. So we started hosting websites, and we started doing websites as well. So the dial-up, at the time, there were other options rather than dial-up, DSL and ISDN and T1s. And so when people would start getting those, and the natural progression was, well, we need a website. So yep, we can do a website. And then because of my background, my thought was, if you're going to have a website, you're going to want to talk to databases. So our differentiator was that we would create database backends to websites, so people could do searches on data that was already part of their mainstay in terms of product. One of our early customers was Cunard.
The cruise line?
The cruise line.
Yeah.
So all their scheduling schedules and stuff that were in databases, we were able to show that up on a website. And so we partner with
tricky problem back there. I mean, you mean for people booking a cruise like that?
No, actually, the way it worked at that time is the schedule would be on a database, and some of the pricing. So but the booking itself was not available. There was a separate system, but he had to present that to clients. So we wrote the database, the interface, and we teamed up with a web designer that did sexy websites, and they were doing the front end, and we would do the back end. So we would present the data and create some of the algorithms to kind of do the scheduling stuff.
Yeah.
At the time, I had no idea what a port of call was. What is a port of call?
Well, that's not an easy challenge. We talk about hundreds or thousands of people going on hundreds or thousands of cruises a year. That's a tricky challenge. Not to mention the fact that that wasn't the kind of thing that was even conceivable as an option or something that you could create, that you could build before the internet came along.
Yeah. So we started doing that, we saw where the opportunity was. So it was dial-up T1s, websites, and we focused on databases. And as we were growing, we realized we need more resources. And so we merged with another ISP. And that company was forward.net. That's what the name was, the other company. We took that name, and then we ended up growing that company. And so in about 2002, that's when we sold. But prior to that, 9/11 came along.
We were talking about that beforehand. So you said 9/11 was a challenge because you had a lot of businesses that were, your customers are going out of business. And from the other side, on the vendor side, some of the companies that you used to fulfill your service also were going out of business.
Yes. And 9/11 came like a hammer to the economy, as we all know.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of customers that were closing doors. So we'd come in the morning and my brother would say, "Hey, these two companies have declared bankruptcy." And it's like, oh my gosh, What was interesting, prior to that, as you know, there was the internet bubble, and people were buying companies for unreasonable amounts. I mean, they were just really paying funny money. And we had a lot of companies approach us wanting to buy us to pay.
Did you have a big offer that you turned down that in retrospect you kind of regretted? Yes. I see.
Yeah. At the time, they were paying 15 times revenue.
Oh my gosh. For an ISP. Wow.
For an ISP. That's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And we had a company that came that offered us, I think it was 8 or 9 times.
In cash or stock? Because sometimes what ends up happening is, you get some of these offers, and then I've heard these stories where people like took it, but they got it in stock, and then afterwards it was worthless. Yeah,
no, it was the ones that we got offered, because we weren't. I think our revenue at the time was maybe 6 million, 7 million. So the companies that were buying, they had cash, or at least that was the conversation.
That's what they're saying, yeah.
And
you turned it down.
They said 8, and we're like, what do you mean 8? I should be getting a 10, 12, 15,
Yeah. It's hard when you see the other companies getting it. Right?
I know.
Yeah.
Even though we knew it was ridiculous, but that's what was going on around. So everybody was, smoking the same message, It's like,
so it must have been hard a couple of years later. Did you have to do layoffs or anything like that after 9/11?
We did have to do some layoffs, but the internet business was growing. So yes, some were going out of business. And in 2002, we were 4 partners, and we were struggling with the partnership agreements that we had. So we decided, we just need one battle to fight, not 2, so fight to get clients, and internal fight. So it was like, let's just sell. And company offered us 3 times. And I was like, oh, we'll take it. Which is a lot more in line of what it really should have been.
Right. So a couple of questions. In retrospect, looking back on it, what, if anything, would you do differently before you went into that merger with forward.net, knowing what you know about the partner issues?
It would have been to really, we had defined what our roles were going to be. And so that was clear, but one of them all of a sudden decided that he didn't have to really pitch in to the same degree as everybody else. So it was like, well, what happens when someone decides that they're not going to perform? Yeah. That's one thing. And then the other piece that happened was define well what the value was going to be of the company when when someone wants to sell or wants to buy. Because we did get in a situation where one of them wanted to buy our shares for a value that we thought
couldn't agree on.
We couldn't agree. And then when we said, okay, well, we'll buy you for that, he said, well, oh no, you have to pay more. And it's like,
yeah,
no, it has to be, you know, if you're offering X, you have to be willing to take X, you know.
And some companies, I think, have what's called a shotgun clause where it requires them to accept that, something like that. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it would have been about having that well defined, and then some other clauses that would prevent that kind of struggle from taking place.
Yeah.
And then maybe I bet it would have been difficult to do more diligence, because at the time and for a couple of years things were working well, and I guess, I mean, people do change, right? And you can't predict everything that's going to happen, but
right.
But yeah, like you say, we could have had some other clauses that would have prevented some of the hassle.
So you end up selling that business? And you obviously like tech because there's kind of a common theme, something technical. Did you have a vision of what you would do afterwards? Did you think, I'm going to go into managed solutions, working with businesses, helping them with their tech challenges?
So when I sold the company, I thought, I don't want to deal with employees anymore. I don't want to hire. I don't want to fire. I don't want to be dealing with any of that, because that's what one of the things that I had to do. So I went into solo consulting. So I was selling my time. I was selling my time as a CIO, as a project manager, working on large projects where I was the individual contributor. And at the time, that felt very comfortable, because I didn't have to worry too much other than, well, what's the next gig going to be? But there was demand for the work that I did. And I was kind of thinking, what's going to be my next move? So in some regard, I was I'm trying to understand what the market would need in terms of any kind of service where I could apply what I knew and what I was able to do and who I could bring. And sure enough, that started appearing a few years later when some people that I knew, friends that I had, would have a company and they would call me up and said, hey, I got, 5 computers, 10 computers, and we don't know how to, make networking. And they'd say, well, help us out. And I would be at the time, well, that's not quite what I do, but okay, I'll help you. And then it's like, well, we have problems. Can we call you? I said, well, I guess you can call me. I'll charge you for it. And then that model started taking shape, because it was first one company, then 2, then 4, then 6. And I was like, this can take shape. And I'd be hiring consultants to help me. And that was working. And then I started understanding about different tools that were coming out, and realized I better start hiring people, because all the money I'm making is going into paying consultants. And
so there's that tension again. So it's like I think it's Godfather Part 3. The famous line about, right, as soon as you're out, they pull me back in, right? So you're back, all of a sudden you're an employer again.
Yeah, exactly. hopefully with a little bit more wisdom.
Yeah, maybe it'd been a few years, so you kind of got the little bit of a breather, and so you work your way back into really kind of building up a bigger business again. It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And so I decided, okay, I gotta find a partner, someone that has skin in the game, that can join me, so that we can build a business.
And that's when you found Hernan.
That's when I found Hernan.
Now, how did you guys know each other, or did you know each other?
Well, this is what I think is, the universe behind you, or divine providence, whatever you want to call it. Stars align. We were both members of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
And I went to an event, and I'm sitting listening to the speaker, and I have this guy sitting next to me. And we just said hello, and he spoke Spanish, and we shook hands, and we started talking a little bit about our businesses. And it's like, oh, I'm an MSP, and it's like, so am I. Oh, interesting. I said, and then the next thing is like, I'm looking at other companies I'd like to merge with. So maybe we can talk about that sometime. And it's like, yeah, I'm thinking of the same thing. And I saw your website, and I really like what you have. It's like, oh, and then next thing, 3-4 months down the road, we're like, okay, we need to merge. It made sense. Yeah, because it really, like any business, it's a scale business and division of labor. So it's like, well, I'll be doing sales and marketing. You're going to do operations, and then I'll bring the business. You're going to help the clients, and then, we'll be merry. Next thing you know, we merged, and it's worked out great. And our vision.
Why do you think that merger worked better than when you merged with Forward.net?
I think because some of our values, I know Hernan and I saw things in a similar fashion. It could be that, could be maybe cultural too, that we're communicating maybe in 2 languages. So there are some things that would come
Shared
across.
Cultural background, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It could be that. Also, he's a pretty determined person, incredibly hardworking. Yeah, and both of us, and so was I, and very frequently would be chatting at 11 at night, at midnight, and it's just what we did. And so there was a lot of that feeling of what it takes to make something happen.
Yeah.
And I think that that was the case with my brother and one of the other partners, but not the other. Didn't have quite it was more like, well, you guys can do the work. I'm just going to go and do something else. And
and now you have 3 offices, 2 of which are, one in Chicago, one outside of Chicago, and one in Miami, of all places. Why Miami? I know you're not in Miami right now, because I don't see a beautiful, warm background behind you. I know you're in shivering, cold March, Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. So Miami is our beta site for the franchise that we're building.
Oh, perfect. So perfect segue, because I was going to ask you about that. So you decided to actually do franchising. So why franchising?
So Hernan and I were talking about how are we going to grow the company. We have pretty lofty goals, a lot of ambition, and it's like, well, we got to find a way to grow it in a way that it can grow fast. But not only that, one of the things that any entrepreneur knows, what distinguishes one company from the other is when you feel you have skin in the game. And while I think getting employees also works, but one of the things that we were reading about is a franchise is able to fund its growth because you have people that are putting their money, so they have skin in the game, and they really want to push it beyond what maybe an employee would be able to. Not that employees don't, but there's that extra. And so we started looking into that avenue. And it so happened that at the time, one of our employees from Argentina wanted to come to the US. And he was interested in Florida. And I said, this can work. This can work because to build a franchise is not something you do overnight. There's a lot of details that you need to iron out. And to have a beta site, a friendly beta site is
and someone that knows you, knows your process, knows your system, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So it seemed again kind of the stars align and the situations kind of put themselves in place, and it's like, oh my gosh, look at this! This was happening by magic design.
What have some of the challenges been for you in setting up that beta site? Because you've been in the Chicagoland area for a long time. This sounds like first time, like really moving into another very different market.
Yeah. Well, part of the challenge is it is developing a new market. So it's taking the marketing that we do here, do it there. And the challenge there is, well, how do you duplicate the marketing here over there? And now you need to have the processes in place that you can tell someone, this is how you're going to sell.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to tell people. And so all that forces you to start thinking, yes, we all know process is important, but this is like, it's not that it's just important. It's you have to do it extremely well, and you have to be able to repeat it over and over again. So you're turning into a McDonald's, if you will. That hamburger looks the same no matter where you sell it.
Yeah.
So in terms of the marketing and the sales, you have to do the same, obviously considering where you are. But so it's really looking at that aspect of the business on how you're going to deliver that.
Of course, one of the big challenges there, I would think, would be that, you're used to operating at a certain size business, certain number of resources, certain number of, support, salespeople, customer support, that kind of stuff. And then when you have a franchise, they don't have all the resources that you do at the home office, I believe. So how do you reconcile those? How do you guide the local franchise in how to do it, but without the same resources that you have now, having done this business for 20 years?
Well, it's a perfect segue to talk about our model. So there are other franchises in our space, and they do precisely what you talk about, which is to buy the franchise. So it's the name, and they got some marketing help, but they need to build their own business. And we've been there. So one of the things we realized is what is going to make our franchise different is that we will deliver the back office to the franchisee. So the franchisee,
so they can focus on sales and marketing.
Correct. They need to focus on sales, marketing, and building that customer relationship and understanding the customer's business, so they can really help them and get those projects underway so that they really can deliver that extra value that otherwise it would be very difficult to do, as we experienced.
Yeah.
As we were growing, you're being chased by a million issues, from vendor agreements, you got to test software, you got to evaluate new software, things are changing, cybersecurity, it's evolving.
Yeah.
While you're doing all these other things. So now we're saying, you don't have to deal with that. We're going to deal with that. So the model is different. It becomes a little bit more complex for us, but in terms of the delivery and consistency, I think it's going to really help our franchisees.
In some ways, it's easier they have it easier than you did, right? Because they have a repeatable model. They have guidance.
Yep.
Which you didn't have. Then they have the back end all handled.
That is correct. That's the emphasis, and that's our differentiator with other franchises.
Yeah. Now you are simultaneously also looking at acquiring some other businesses, and kind of in the midst of that. Why both approaches?
So our business, like any other business, is a scale business. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to get to be larger so that we have buying power, and then we can have more specialized resources. And no mystery here, tech knowledge, tech expertise is high. I mean, today, listening to the report on unemployment, you have layoffs in IT, but the demand for IT people is still as high. And it's not just the US, but it's worldwide. So, if you can say the winners or the people that are going to be ahead of the pack are those that can achieve scale and can attract more talent. And whether we like it or not, you got to have a certain scale. Yes, the franchisees are going to be bringing the clients, but then we need to have that back end. So yes, we'll acquire clients, we'll acquire talent. Yeah, and that's going to help us be able to create that differentiator and enable us to be really efficient at providing service at a really competitive delivery price.
Now, you mentioned you had an employee that was in Argentina. I know you grew up in part in Bolivia. You speak Spanish. So I imagine you've taken advantage of employing people in other parts of the globe that have high technical skills, aren't as expensive. Argentina in particular is a country that has really struggled in recent years. So talk a little bit about how that has played a role or not in your business.
Yes, actually, it plays a big role in our business. Hernan, he's from Argentina, and consequently, when he and I got together, he had a resource in Argentina that helped with the management of servers. Right.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
And so when we got together, the person that was helping him was around and realized we need more help and let's hire someone. It's like, oh, I know my buddy that's, close by. And then he's in Argentina. I jumped in. It's like, we got a cost advantage. The quality of the people there is great. So he said, that's going to give us an advantage. It's going to give us an advantage because we can get someone that's going to cost less. And then because we pay less, we can get maybe two more and be able to provide a better service. Yeah. Because we're going to have more people supporting clients. The other piece that is to our advantage is the culture is similar. Mm-hmm. So there's not a cultural difference in terms of someone talking to a customer here. It's practically the same. Yeah. Everybody speaks English that we hire. They may have an accent, but it's not any different than people from other parts of the country here. They may have an accent or not. So that's played to our advantage.
And for companies listening to this that are curious about hiring in Argentina or other countries, are there any resources that you use for that, or is it really literally been like just kind of word of mouth recommendations?
It started as word of mouth recommendations, and then we ended up hiring our own recruiter to help us find resources and then help us manage the people that we hire there. Mm-hmm. But we've also used a couple of companies to help us bring people. The demand for talent is high. So we are competing with global companies to hire people.
Yeah, the big tech companies are savvy to this as well.
Oh, yeah, you bet. Yeah. Actually, some of our employees have come from IBM, Accenture, and the like. Yeah. Because we're smaller, we're a little nimbler, we're able to pay in dollars over there, which is a big benefit, and give flexibility that they may not get with a larger company.
What sorts of challenges have you had? What's the downside, or what are some of the challenges with hiring in an emerging market, a country like that has not had great stability in recent years economically?
One of the challenges has been paying people there. How
to get money to them? Literally get money to them?
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the currency, inflation there, or?
Yeah, it's the currency inflation, and also there's the official rate, and there's the black market rate, and there's a huge gap. So if you were to pay in the official rate, it wouldn't work. And every company
so you pay them in Dogecoin, or what do you what's the solution?
Yeah, so we pay them in dollars. So the question is how to get the dollars.
How do they get it? Got it.
Yeah. So
and is that their problem or yours?
Right now it's our problem. So we found a mechanism that, I wish it said we were the ones that created the mechanism.
I'm picturing a guy with a donkey with a bunch of US dollars on the back of it or something when you say a mechanism. You're like, I can't go into the details.
Now, how did you know it was a donkey?
It's a guy with a donkey with a bunch of money on the back. That's our high-tech solution.
Yeah. Well, it's not far from the truth.
I mean, I've heard stories like this, right? Sometimes you have to get innovative.
Yeah. No, we've used a couple of companies that have, they work with a bank outside of Argentina. So you make a deposit there, and they've got companies, they work in Argentina where they're getting dollars so they can give pesos. So you do pay for that. So we give them the currency.
How do you protect yourself from that going awry in a worst case type scenario? Well,
a lot of it has to do with dealing with people that have a reputation, and your exposure is 1 month. If something's going to go wrong. Yeah. Now, because how the market works is those people that act as intermediaries, they got to protect their reputation, because if they do something funny, the word is going to come around really fast. So there's that market pressure, because we're not the only ones to do that. Yeah. And I mean, they make a pretty penny. It's 5%. Yeah. 8% sometimes.
Yeah.
And fees.
We're almost out of time. And so I have a couple more questions, but what are you excited about as we look to the future? You've got a lot going on, acquiring businesses, franchising. What are you excited about?
Well, I am really excited the fact that we're growing. I mean, by year end, we're going to double in size.
Wow.
So that's pretty exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's really nice to see. Our plan is to grow even more next year, because there's going to be franchising, more acquisitions. And the idea of building a company that can really deliver value, that we can really help other clients grow. And one of the things that I like to be able to, and this is what I tell my clients, is my job is to make sure that I can cut costs, I can help you cut costs, I can help you grow, and I can help you be more efficient. And if I can do that, then I'm doing my job. And to be able to do it at scale, that's going to be awesome, because, I think that's one of the things that's going to help us really cut through the crowd, is say, we're the company that's helping other companies get to where they need to get, and particularly in the area of cybersecurity, that is so critical right now. Yeah. And that's one of the areas that we focus. Yeah.
Yeah. A great area to be focusing on from a business perspective right now. And then I didn't warn you about this question, but I ask it almost every time, and I'm going to ask it anyways. Hopefully you're okay with it.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of gratitude, especially expressing gratitude to those who helped you in your journey along the way. Yeah. Now, when I ask that, about half the time, most people will immediately default to their family or their team. But really what I want to get at with that question is, who are the peers, who are the contemporaries? You mentioned you sat down at a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce event. You sat next to someone who became your business partner. Yeah. People like that, Hernan, obviously, but who else, in your journey would you thank for helping you along the way?
There's a company that we use for our marketing and sales. It's called a technology marketing toolkit. The founder of that company, her name is Robin Robbins.
Yes, I know her. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she's got an incredible story. And they made a huge difference for us. So I am really grateful for what she's done for us. I mean, it's her marketing and sales process. Yes, we paid for a membership, but that's really helped us grow to where we are, because we're using a lot of what she's done. And part of the people that are there, it's also, I'm grateful that they're around, because it's a community that where, even though in theory we compete, but we help each other. And so I'm grateful that I'm part of a community that doesn't look at eating each other, but helping each other. And so I think we're in a really good community in terms of industry. That's great.
Juan Carlos, where can people go to learn more about you and CIO Landing and connect with you?
Yes. So our website is CIOlanding.com. And if you want to know a little bit about me, it's Bosacoma.com.
Excellent. All right, Juan Carlos, thanks so much.
John, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.